Editing a great video that people will be engaged in requires you to cut your raw footage and make it into something magical. I'll show you some great tips to optimize your scissor hands in Camtasia, and it's just a snip away. Hey, it's Gord here. Nice to see you again. If it's your first time here and you want to make great videos faster and want to become a ninja at video editing, then make sure you hit the subscribe button below because that's what this channel is all about and you won't want to miss a thing. Let's dive in. Tip number 1, how to cut, delete, and ripple delete. First, let's assume that you know the basics on content selection and zooming. Once you've selected content to remove, how do you know whether to cut, delete, or ripple delete? If you just want to create a gap where you delete the selected content, then use the standard delete by pressing the delete key or clicking the right mouse button menu item delete. I often use this delete to just remove a clip to observe the impact of it being gone and then there being a gap in place. After seeing the landscape, I may decide to do a ripple delete. Of course, what you do depends on your intention for what remains after you do the delete. If you wish to slide the right-hand clips over to close the gap, then press Ctrl plus Delete or click on the right mouse button Ripple Delete menu item. I use the Ripple Delete quite often, especially when I'm editing fresh video clips that have several takes, good and bad, in the clip with gaps or pauses, filler words, and other blunders that I want to cut out. You could also use the scissors or cut tool or press Ctrl plus X to do the cutting. The cut command has the added value that the segment cut is also copied to the clipboard and therefore is available for pasting again in this project or even apply to another project you open. And last but not least, the simplest way to trim content from the beginning or end of an individual clip is to move the mouse to the clip edge and wait until the double arrow appears and then click and drag to shorten. Please note that whether you cut, delete, or ripple delete, you may decide that you want to keep a backup copy of the selection or even save it to reuse later. You can always use the Add Timeline Selection to Library feature to save it in the library. Ideally, the library should be used to retain items that you will reuse, not just for temporary storage. Tip number 2, stitching and splitting. When you cut or ripple delete, the two remaining clip elements get auto-stitched together. Auto-stitching is the default behavior, but you could alternatively uncheck the preference, enable auto-stitching, if you would rather the remaining clips be separate split clips as a default. If clips are stitched, you can unstitch or split them by using the unstitch command. Do this by placing the mouse over the stitch location on the track and selecting the unstitch menu item. Independent of a cut or ripple delete, you can also split media into two pieces by using the split tool or S keystroke shortcut. So how do you utilize stitched or split media? I have been using the auto stitch default, but regardless, I adjust my clips to function as stitched or split depending on what the situation demands. I find that if I have an original single video clip where I need to ripple delete one or more pieces from it to get rid of bad takes and other blunders, I may want to stitch together single clip as an end result as well. The stitch together clip is easier to move around and to make visual property, animation, or other effect changes that will be effective for the whole clip and not get reset as you cross over a clip boundary. If I want the clips to retain their own properties independent of the adjacent clips, I'll utilize the split approach. One example situation where I would want to retain split clips is where I have the need to insert new content between clips, like the insertion of a transition. Tip number 3, non-destructive edits. Don't worry. If you accidentally messed up and deleted something you want to get back, you can just use the undo command, Ctrl plus Z or edit undo. Of course, if you did an undo that you want to get back, you can use the redo command, Ctrl plus Y or edit redo. The key here is that Camtasia uses non-destructive edits. Non-destructive means that the original media imported to the media bin is always intact and untouched, regardless of how many times it's added to the timeline and edited. This non-destructive capability is managed inside Camtasia's project file, where it keeps track of the original media and whatever edits you have applied to it for each iteration placed on the timeline. Tip number 4, save multiple project versions. If in the process of editing a project, I make a decision to do some major rework, and that may include deleting a chunk off the timeline, it's a good idea to create a backup copy with another name or version number before I start the rework. This best practice discipline will enable me to revert to a previous version should I decide to toss the rework effort or even seek to retrieve a portion of the work from the older project version to copy-paste back into the latest version I'm now working on. Many people have the smart discipline to save multiple project versions as part of their editing work routine. For example, I save another version every half hour or so, or a little more often if I can remember. Hey, I got a few more cool things to show you about cuts and editing, but before I go there, if you want to discover how to make great videos from home, if you want to learn about dialing in your video shooting setup, if you want to learn about video cameras, audio, and lighting, then make sure to grab my free Better Videos from Home guide by clicking on the YouTube card displayed above. Tip number 5, lock tracks for protection. When you go to delete a selection or segment that you highlighted, you're in essence cutting a swath through all the layered tracks. This is great as long as it's your intention to cut out the piece entirely, video, audio, callouts, images, whatever's there. However, if one or more of the clips on the timeline are things you want to keep and not cut, like a piece of music or a sound effect or a callout you wish to retain, then you can lock the appropriate tracks temporarily so they're not affected by any editing action you take. You can apply the lock by clicking on the lock icon beside the track name. Once you're finished deletion or any other edits you wanted to do, you can just unlock the track that you temporarily protected by clicking on the lock icon again to reset it. Tip number 6, add the fancy stuff later. Music and sound effects are like the icing on the cake. It's better to add those later in the process because if you don't, and you do a lot of deleting and moving around of content, it's very likely that you will have to preserve and fiddle with those pieces as you go, which creates extra work and the risk of messing things up. For this reason, I like to add music and sound effects after the core editing has been completed. Wow, the cutting, deleting, splitting, and stitching can definitely get messy because there are so many options. Thank you so much for watching. I love creating these videos on Camtasia and how to make better videos. If you want to learn all of the secret tips and you want to discover how to make great videos fast, make sure to click on the icon below and subscribe, and you won't miss a thing. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.